Hello and welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Julia Kim. Here's what's coming up on the programme today. Israel reopens its borders after banning most foreign visitors for the past 20 months. But strict COVID-19 vaccine requirements for visitors may still hinder the tourism sector's recovery. Also coming up in the show, we revisit the Syrian city of Raqqa. Once the capital of the so-called Islamic State, we'll take a look at how residents are coping 4 years after the city was taken back from jihadists. And as world leaders meet at the COP26 climate summit, our correspondents show us how global warming is taking its toll on Turkey. But first, this week, Israel reopened its borders to vaccinated tourists, but local hoteliers are advising them to read the fine print first. For one, visitors can only enter if less than 6 months have passed since their last dose, so only people who received their last COVID jab after the 1st of May are allowed in. Now, some exceptions may apply, but those in the tourism sector say these requirements will put off many from visiting. Ellen Gainsford reports.
There were cries of joy from these tourists after they touched down in Israel. The country closed its border a year and a half ago in response to the pandemic. But as of November the 1st, vaccinated travellers are once again allowed in.
We all had to get our booster shot, PCR test. We had to go through some training. We had many hoops to apply.
Due to all these requirements, only tourists from countries where vaccines are easy to access are allowed in. As most children aren't vaccinated, they're not able to enter Israel. Tourists are once again visiting the old city of Jerusalem, but the numbers are minimal compared to previous years. 300,000 people will have visited the country by the end of the year. That's compared to more than 4.5 million in 2019. The Israeli authorities estimate that the tourism sector has lost around 6 billion euros due to the pandemic.
We hope that things get back to normal, but I think that the situation is very difficult. It will take a lot of time for tourism to return to how it was.
Israel delivered the world's fastest vaccine rollout, and it had been hoping for a speedy economic recovery. But the Delta variant forced the country to rethink its immunization campaign and launch plans for a third booster jab in July.
There is good reason to believe that without this very early booster wave, Israel would have continued to see continuous incline in the number of cases beyond what it has already seen.
Since July, 40% of Israelis have been given a third dose of the Pfizer vaccine. That includes more than 2/3 of elderly people. And the boosters seem to be working. Over the past 2 months, the number of cases has dropped by 9-fold. But despite this success, there are still fears for a 5th COVID wave this winter.
Lebanon is calling for talks with Saudi Arabia to ease a spiralling diplomatic row. It was sparked by remarks made by a Lebanese minister on the Yemen war. It couldn't have come at a worse time for Beirut, which is struggling to avert economic collapse. Saudi Arabia is Lebanon's 3rd largest export market.
The Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdallah Abu Habib called for talks with Saudi Arabia to ease the row caused by comments made by Lebanon's information minister that were critical of the Saudi-led coalition fighting rebels in Yemen. He said,
Lebanon invites Saudi Arabia to engage in dialogue to solve all outstanding problems and not just the latest spat, so that the same crisis is not repeated every time.
The Lebanese information minister, George Kodahi, has been asked to put his patriotic sense above all else to defuse the crisis with Saudi Arabia. He has said he won't resign. He argues his comments that Yemen's Houthi rebels were defending themselves against external aggression were made before he became a minister. They were recorded in August and first broadcast last Monday. Riyadh was infuriated by the remarks and last Friday expelled the Lebanese ambassador, recalled its own envoy from Beirut and suspended Lebanese imports. On Sunday, the Saudi foreign minister said dealing with Lebanon was pointless.
There is a crisis in Lebanon because of the domination of Iran's agents on the scene. This is what concerns us, and this is what makes dealing with Lebanon futile.
The words Iran's agents refer to the Iran-backed Shiite movement Hezbollah, led by Hassan Nasrallah. Saudi Arabia views it as a terrorist group. The crisis isn't just bilateral. 3 Gulf states have aligned with Saudi Arabia in what is a fresh blow for Lebanon. The country is mired in economic collapse and needs the money Lebanese expats send home, not least from Saudi Arabia.
Well, let's turn now to Syria. And the city of Raqqa was once the capital of the Islamic State group's self-declared caliphate. 4 years after it was wrested from jihadists, the city still lies in ruins. Traumatized residents are trying to move on with their lives, but they still face daunting challenges.
This is where the 2015 Paris attacks were planned, the former capital of the Islamic State group. It's been 4 years since Raqqa was recaptured, and the city is still being rebuilt. Around 80% of it was destroyed during the conflict. Residents have got used to living in the wreckage. Mohammed was a civil servant before the war and had a 3-story house. But now his staircase doesn't lead to anywhere.
Our homes were destroyed, but no one is helping us to rebuild. We are alone. The Islamic State group was defeated. They abandoned us. Before the jihadists and the war, we had good lives. We had good salaries. Now there is no work. Look at our lives. We have no future.
Children work alongside their parents to rebuild the city, like teenagers Hussein and Masood.
I work here to feed my family.
Our area was completely destroyed. We have to rebuild. And as life is expensive since the war, this is how we earn money to survive.
How much do you earn?
$2 a day.
His 11-year-old brother, Ibrahim, earns 50 centimes for 10 hours of work.
It's hard because I have to bring the bucket up and it's heavy when it's full of cement. Of course, I would prefer to study, but how would I help my family?
Children born after the Islamic State group are a forgotten generation. Only around a third go to school. Ibrahim's father is ashamed of their situation.
I work with him and my 2 other sons there. There are 4 of us and we can only just afford enough to eat. I am humiliated. I see my sons are exhausted. I can't do anything.
Mohammed al-Nasir works with women who are former followers of the Islamic State group, helping them readjust to society. This family has only just been allowed out of a camp for former jihadists. Still very religious, the women don't take off their niqabs.
For the moment, we can't find a larger house. We can't put the children into school, so we don't go out very much. We don't feel safe.
You don't feel safe?
No, not really.
Because you were with the Islamic State group?
People are wary of us.
Mohammed al-Nasir has a lot of work ahead of him.
They've only been back in Raqqa for around a week, so it'll take some time for them to adapt to normal life. With the authorities, we're ready to forgive them. Our only aim is to get rid of the Islamic State group completely.
The Islamic State group used to execute their victims on this square. Now, this colourful sign shows that the city is once again hopeful for its future.
After a summer of devastating forest fires and flooding, Turkey has become the last G20 country to ratify the Paris Agreement. Although it's among the group of 20 biggest economies, Turkey wants UN climate officials to reclassify it as a developing country. That way, it would gain access to funding that could help Ankara adapt its inefficient farming methods. Our team on the ground have this report from Central Anatolia.
It's come to resemble a lunar landscape. Tuz Gölü, Salt Lake, is located in Anatolia's heartland. Climate change hit Turkey's second biggest lake hard.
We're walking in the middle of a vast desert. We still call it a lake, but it's a desert. When I see this, it breaks my heart.
Fahri Tunç knows the area like the back of his hand. He's been photographing it for the last 30 years, documenting the bird species that stop here to rest along their migration routes in spring.
Here, it used to be full of pink flamingos. Everywhere you looked, it was pink and white. Normally here, every year, 20,000 birds are born.
With higher temperatures and lower rainfall levels, 60% of Turkey's 300 lakes have dried up over the last 50 years. A situation that Fahri Tunç also blames on poor farming practices and policies.
If you grow crops that need a lot of water, there'll be no more water in Tuz Gölü, or even in the surrounding areas. And because it rains less and less, you're messing up nature's equilibrium. And nature will punish you. One day, there will be no more water.
Hundreds of underground water sources once fed this hypersaline lake, but the sources have run dry as illegal pumping stations were installed. More than 100,000 of them dot the lake's 1,665 square kilometers. Farmers here grow water-thirsty crops like corn and sugar beet in the mineral soil. They say they have no choice.
We find water at 30 meters underground, but elsewhere it's up to 150 meters. We have to keep looking even though the situation is worrying. I try to grow crops that need less water.
Like other rural regions in Turkey, voters here chose the ruling AK party. The government is now reluctant to take measures that would anger its constituents. By ratifying the Paris Agreement, Ankara hopes to access the latest technology and receive climate funding, but that may not be enough to save what's left of what was once the breadbasket of Turkey.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's edition of Middle East Matters. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned because there's more world news coming up here on France 24.
Nearly 200 countries are meeting here in Scotland for what could be their last chance to rein in global warming. Their commitment still falling short of the Paris Agreement goals. They must radically ramp up ambition at a time when greenhouse gas emissions have reached an unprecedented level. Join us for our special coverage of COP26. We'll be bringing you the latest news and analysis here on France 24.